Rules on hugs, then. What do you make of those rules? Is that madness or sensible now at this stage?
I think it's sensible madness. I think that people who have been hugging throughout the lockdown, we've been close enough, luckily, with our bubbles, with our families, but it's the people we've missed. The caller that you had just now, the viewer saying about missing family who they don't live with, having to travel to see them. And we really need hugs as social beings, that we rely on them. The very first thing we do as soon as we come out of the womb is be hugged by our parents. And throughout our childhood and into our adulthood, we replicate that same pattern. When we are feeling in need, when we feel a bit lost, we need a hug, and it makes everything better.
Totally understand that concerning mental well-being, but if there is an element of risk, not everybody's been vaccinated, we do have these so-called variants of concern, why say it's allowed at all?
Because I think that people are quite cautious, and we have learnt the lessons that we need to exercise some independent thought here. So the guidance on wearing a mask, not hugging for too long. And if you haven't been vaccinated, be very cautious about those hugs. If you have been, then check. And we now have a brilliant system where you can order a lateral flow test very quickly, and you can do those tests to make sure that you're safe. If you're exhibiting any symptoms at all, then exercise a bit of sense and don't go and hug.
Do you think people basically already are doing the things the government is going to sanction later today?
Almost always. I mean, throughout the lockdown, there have been people who haven't followed the guidelines, who haven't worn masks throughout the time, who have been mixing when we have been told we're not allowed to mix in certain numbers. However, it's really important to note that they're just a tiny minority of people, and overwhelmingly, people have followed the government guidance and have been listening to what's the best advice from scientists to go ahead.
You talked earlier about the importance of social contact for mental well-being. What's the impact of what we've endured over the last year for many? Because obviously the lockdowns will be easing, will people recover quickly, or do you fear a long-term effect on many?
I think we'll see a slow long-term effect of people just readjusting. I think the initial euphoria of being able to mix with our loved ones, get out and about, mix in bigger crowds, that will be lovely. But the impact of all of this long period of lockdown, of furlough, of people not having worked, people not having security about their work, lots of relationships have undergone drastic change, either for the better or for worse, but things have changed. And so we are never going to go back to our pre-pandemic lives. And there will be this mental health issue of relationships having changed, of things not being quite right, of not feeling in place anymore. And we'll see that trickle through the society, and it will certainly be something that we work with in mental health.
And I suppose an element of anxiety for those who now think, yes, they can start doing social mixing. There will be social demands, and many people may find that quite pressured.
It will be really enormously pressuring on people who just aren't ready to leave the pandemic, or for whom actually elements of the pandemic have allowed them to thrive. It hasn't been brilliant for anyone by any means, but for those who are less social, actually not having to put that mask on to go out and to be sociable has been a real relief for them. And so when we're coming out of this lockdown, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And if you're not ready to hug, if it's not what you want to do, then just be very clear about your boundaries. And if it's somebody who'd never liked hugging before the pandemic, they're unlikely to want to have a big bear hug right now.
Everyone will be relieved to get back to indoor dining if that's what they really enjoy and want to do, not least the bars and restaurants. But are you concerned that in those environments maybe the social barriers will drop quite significantly and we could actually have another spike?
There's always that risk, and it's always been there. And we have seen that when people have mixed, the spikes have occurred, and we've had to go into another lockdown. The difference, of course, now is that we have a large swathes of the population who are vaccinated. And I think the population, we have learned that if we don't follow the guidance, we end up back in another lockdown. And so there's a lot of independent and individual responsibility here as well.
Yes, and you mentioned that word cautious a couple of times. Do you think we can get people to behave sensibly? Are people behaving sensibly generally?
Generally, absolutely. I think that when we see the images on social media, on the TV programs and the news that show large gatherings of people getting together, no social distancing, it can create a sense of fear in us, and people can think that's what's happening outside their front doors in the world and make us not want to venture out. But actually, in reality, that's really the minority of the population, and overwhelmingly, people are observing the guidance.